So I want to wonder about who you are. I want to wonder about identity. Because identity is the basis for everything we think we are, for everything that's going on here in the human society, right? This whole thing comes down to who do we think we are? And it would be easier to talk with yourself and other people if we would look more at what we are than who we are. Because the who is an outcome of the what. The who is a symptom of the disease, so to say. And it's a big subject, therefore. And it's difficult to lay it out here in half an hour and pretend like I'm going to say something that makes a lot of sense to anyone. So we'll see how it goes. We'll see where we end up, and we will see if it's of any use to anyone. Now, I like talking about things I do not fully understand, because that's interesting. It's not interesting for me to repeat something I once thought and now see as real, because it's just meh. More interesting it is to look at something, and which hopefully not only tells you something about what I see, but also how I look at it and why I look at it like that. Anyway, FYI. So when we talk about identity, we really talk about two somewhat distinct things. And when it comes to identity, when it comes to human operating, every separation we make is false. Every thing we separate within ourselves or with the thing we're dealing with, reality, is turning reality into a very flawed and simplistic model. For example, if I say you are a body and a mind, it's already completely bullshit. It's even more bullshit than usual. Because I am pretending like these are two separate things when they are not separate at all. To simplify this, you could say that the body holds the mind. It is the creator of the brain, right? The container is what enables the thought. But the thought also influences constantly the container. And in a way, in a very more accurate way, you could say that the body both enables the brain, but it's also part of it. And the brain, or the thinking, creates the body and is also part of it. So it is a very interesting dynamic that is going on there. It really isn't a dynamic in the sense that the brain is doing this to the body and the body is doing that to the brain. It's one thing. It's the machine, so to say. And the thoughts of the machine are part of the machine. And I will come back to this ad nauseum, is that how you say it, in the future, because this is somewhat of the essence of the whole seeing through, is once you start realizing that there's a functioning and a content to that functioning. But let's leave that for another time. What I want to talk about is identity. And when I look at identity, I see two separate things that are really not separate at all, but it's easier to talk about them if I separate them. And these two things are, you could say, the being, or what I kind of think of as the ego, but the ego is a tricky word, as many people have ideas about what that is or isn't. Some even call it an enemy. So I'll try to call it the being, right? The single being, the thing that you are, your body, your mind, this animal. What I like to call the God animal, right? The animal with the awareness of itself. The awareness that is aware of itself. It's the squared awareness. It's crazy. Then on the other hand, there is the outside world that is apparently going on, right? Which you are a part of. You are living in it. It creates you, and you create it, but it creates you in the sense that if you become aware at whatever age, and you will find yourself becoming aware again and again in different ways, which might feel like you're becoming more aware, but that's also for another time. But it has created, you are created through this culture. So once you are awake, to notice that you are awake, and not awake in the sense that somewhat like enlightenment, but just when you wake up and you realize you're something separate from other things in a way, then you have already been created as whatever it is you are. Your tastes, your preferences, your ideas, your concepts, all of them are not yours at all. They have been put there. And what you find is that what is been put in there is at odds with what is coming from within, right? So there's the being, which has somewhat of an identity or a functioning, and there's the culture, which gives you an identity and has a functioning. And I think today I want to look mostly at this cultural thing, which I call the externalizing of the identity, right? You're identifying yourself through the external, which isn't good or bad. It's not even something you could stop because there's nothing else to identify with on the outside. And even the way you identify, your language, your logic, all the things you know or think you know, have been put there by this culture, right? The machine creates the patterns, not the specifics, but is a general pattern maker. The culture fills in the specifics of that pattern. So both are needed to create the pattern as a pattern and as a specific pattern, so general and specific, and you cannot separate one from the other. You could live in a different culture and see what it does to you, but I wonder if that's very helpful. If anything, or if it's helpful in any way, it is to make you realize that the content of your patterns isn't necessarily something you chose yourself. And also the awareness that if you live somewhere else in a different culture, then the original culture that was programmed into you might subside in favor of the other, but it's not so much that there's the situation where there is no culture. Now, this might lead to the seeing through of the culture, which can be helpful. But let's focus on just you're living in a culture and it is something you have to deal with. Now, we all live in a culture because we are born out of a human, and unless you get raised by wolves, which would make you live in a wolf culture, you pretty much live in a human culture somewhere in the world with whatever specifics that culture has offered you. And not offered you freely, but has programmed them into you. Now, why is it interesting to look at this? Well, it's interesting because instead of thinking about what we are, which would be more helpful, I would think, in most cases, because it's underemphasized, we look a lot at who are we, right? Who am I? I want to be the true me. And even though we pretend to be a civilized society that is advanced in some ways and advancing still, you could say that the creation of identity, which is further from your being, is the somewhat primitive, or I don't want to short so primitive here. What's a good word to say? That it's a weaker form of identification. So identifying yourself through the external is a weaker form of identification. And this makes a lot of sense because the culture needs you to be weak, right? What would come of the culture if all men were self-reliant? If all men would think for themselves? What then of the culture, right? You are a medium that processes the awareness and has thoughts, feelings, and actions because of that. But the culture is also a medium, and the culture needs you as its fuel to perpetuate it, right? We will talk about media in the future, but media are self-contained, self-biased, perpetual machines, functions that require fuel to operate. And what you will find is that the fuel they need is really of no consequences to it. It just needs fuel to burn. So, part of an external medium that requires you as fuel is that it has to make you believe you are dependent on it. Because if you were to realize that it is dependent on you, then where would it leave its function? Why would you offer yourself up as fuel of that medium if the medium really needs you and you don't need it? But maybe I'm going too fast here. The point I'm trying to look at is that you could say that the culture offers you many choices. And these choices are there to build up this idea of what you think you are. And many people spend a long time of their available time in trying to figure out what is the best choice for them, right? They have preferences, they have taste, right? They have beliefs. We all have beliefs, that's all we have. And so they think that a big part of what makes them them is the choices they make about the external offerings, right? You could say that they are consumers with a well-developed taste. That's how people see adulthood. That's how people see artists or creators. That's how people see civilization, right? The enhancing of taste or the becoming more specific is how we look at the sophistication of men, right? And women too, but I'm just talking about men, like the humankind. I don't know. You could say this even about science and technology. It is really a getting more specific with the laws of nature and the universe. It's getting a better taste and being able to make better choices about what's happening on the outside and creating models, right? Science is the creation of models which have predictive power about what happens on the outside. And so we focus a lot on the external world. Now, when I talk about the forming of yourself through culture, I'm not talking about science, I'm talking about identification, self-identification through the choices about the external. A way to look at it, which I find interesting, is the difference between, like, let's say, people who just eat whatever and then vegetarians. Now, I don't have anything against vegetarians, although it might sometimes sound like that, because they get me riled up in a fun way. I really like thinking and talking about this thing, where if you talk about religion, which is the same thing, people get really offended really quick. When you talk about this specific choice of not eating animals or animal products, which is vegetarianism, I don't even know the term in English. Anyway, it's more, they're more open to it, right? They have made a choice, but it's a recent choice, meaning, right, it isn't something everybody's doing, so or has been doing for thousands of years, so there's a lot of infusion of emotion. It's just like it's a new thing, right? The amount of vegetarians in my circle, so to say, is increasing. So it's a thing that's coming up. And as it's coming up, people hold it as their identity, but they are unsure about it. They don't know if it's correct. They think, of course, it's correct because that's why they made the choice, but they understand that they are not at a point where they could, you know, rile up and execute the non-vegetarians, although maybe they would love to do that. Because we're not at that point yet. It isn't like smoking, where it used to be everybody smoked, then just people smoked who wanted to smoke, and now if you smoke, you know, you're disgusting. And that's a fun one to look at too, because it's really bad for your health, so people really are convinced they're in the right. And this is exactly where I should be heading with this wandering. And that is the thing where all of these choices, all of this cultural shaping of self, the internalizing of external choices to create this idea about what you are or who you are is in essence morals. It's a choice in morals. And what are morals? Well, I don't know. I would say for myself that a moral is a belief you hold that could help you navigate the unexpected world as it comes at you, right? A moral is like a guideline. I am not a killer, right? I do not want to be a murderer. This is a moral choice. I've seen what murder can do. I've been near to violence, and as a result, I could say I do not find it pleasant. Maybe it's the culture, maybe it's me, I don't know, but if I do the math, I say in the end, no, doesn't sound appealing to me. So you know what? I will choose not to be a murderer, right? Like the vegetarians do with the animals. Now, does this mean I will never murder? Well, no, of course not. I might murder someone today. I don't know. Meaning, if the situation unfolds in a certain way, who knows what I will do? I don't. And to pretend that I do is to set myself up for disappointment. It sets me up for not meeting expectations. And that's the problem with expectations. They really serve no function other than to disappoint. So, to have a moral is a guideline. I would prefer not to murder other people. That is my moral. Now, in this world we live in, and of course religion has played a big part in that, the way that it functions differently. You see, because we do not see that we are all a specific application of general guidelines and ideas, we come to think of the world as objective, and we say no. There aren't specific applications of ideas. There's general ideas that are true for everyone and every time, everywhere. And in order to be a good person, right, the culture needs you to be good because it means you'll be bad, which means there's dependency there because you're obviously not able to meet the standards. So in order to do that, they will generalize specific things and say, instead of this being a way of living or a guideline, it is now a law. It is now an unbreakable thing. So the means become the end. The belief that was there to help you now becomes externalized into something that is there to prove you incorrect, to make you a hypocrite, to make you false, to make you wrong, to make you a convicted person. How do you say this? A criminal. So culture does things in a way to set you up for failure. And it makes sense, right? If culture would say, it is normal to eat, people would be like, yeah, I know, I do it every day. So culture has no opinion about eating, because we do it and we must do it or culture would die very quickly. So the thing that culture offers you is in opposition of the general public, is in opposition of your nature, right? So where we have this natural inclination to be hungry and overeat, the culture says you must not eat too much or you must not eat the wrong thing, right? So we make the thing that feels natural into something that is less natural. We say, well, if you do that, that's wrong. So you have to listen to me how to do it right? We have dependency here. And so what we are doing is we are taking this internal guideline, forming it into an external law, and now it's something that confronts us. It's something that causes us to behave differently than we would or should, right? It causes what I call dissonance. It creates friction. And friction is good for culture because friction causes you to feel in a way you think you do not want to feel, and now you are searching for answers. Now you are in need of help. And so all these cultural things, like being a vegetarian, are in fact religion. It's the taking of the belief and turning it into a believed non-belief, right? It's not a belief, it's a fact. It's not a belief, it's a law, right? We do not believe things. This is how things are. and you cannot dispute them, you must get in line with them. Now, we live in a culture today, luckily, where these things are less forced upon you than they used to be, although I'm not sure about that really goes for everyone everywhere. And we'll see how the vegetarian thing plays out. But the thing is that you are taking this outside thing and picking and choosing for yourself what it means for you and then internalizing it. So this means that if you are a vegetarian, you do not eat meat. Not ever. You're not a functional vegetarian most of the time. I do not like meat, so therefore I do not eat it. Or I think the eating of meat is bad for you, and so I choose to not go along with that because I think it's bad for my health, or I think it's bad for the planet, or whatever thing you think that could be functional, but now it becomes this moral thing, right? Where you say eating of meat is a bad thing and no one should eat it. Now it's funny because this serves you well. The moral man who speaks of moral is the immoral man, because he's not using his morals to guide himself, he's using his morals to guide others, which gives him power and influence, but also makes him feel really good, because if I am able to make choices that are obviously the correct ones, and you are not, well then obviously I'm the better person here. So by first saying the eating of meat is in fact murder, and it's destroying the planet, not only can I feel good about myself by making the right choice, I can feel even better about myself because you are not able to make that choice. And now, there might be problems in the world, but we know who's causing those, don't we? It's not me. I'm doing my part. It's you. You are weak, you are a murderer, you are disgusting, right? All these things come into play. And so really, what you're doing is you're helping yourself feel better about things by calling into reality a choice that apparently has to be made, and there's the right choice and the wrong choice. And now you've externalized your identity through the eating of a specific thing, and are now able to go around dishing out judgment about what's going on here. Because you are now the victim of the bad behavior of others. The world is a victim, right? You are using the world for your own building up of the ego, the idea of self. The world would be a good place if only we would stop cows from being born so we can eat them, right? Do you know how much farts they put into the air and how bad that is? I don't know. So it's very interesting to think for yourself about what is it that creates your identity? What is it that you think is the moral choice, right? Because this goes for everything. The moment you externalize a belief and say this is good and not just whatever, it's this externalized rule that needs to be followed in order to be good. I can't believe people watch that much Netflix. I can't believe they don't read non-fiction books. I can't believe they don't go to school. I can't believe, I don't know, they don't work hard, right? Whatever you think is good, it's just a belief turned into a pretend rule. And that's how you build yourself up. That's how you create this idea of who you are based on your preferences of consuming the choices that have been offered to you by culture. Which is an inherent friction. Because the moment you do good, you also do bad. Because you are a person, a human, a thing. How do you say this? You are not consistent. You change your mind. You change your preferences. Sometimes you're angry. Sometimes you're happy. All these things happen. They happen to you as much as they get laid upon others you are in contact with. So you cannot follow your own rules. Right? Why do vegetarians have all these meat look-alike things? What is going on there? Why can't they just eat vegetables? Why do they have to have meat replacements? Right? It's a veggie burger. Why? I don't understand why you eat a veggie burger. You're a vegetarian. Eat vegetarian things. Why do they need to look like meat? Why do they need to taste like meat? Why do they need to have the same texture as meat? I'm not trying to get my meat to look like a carrot. Why do you want to have your carrot look like meat? What is going on there? What is it? I don't understand. Is it because you really would like to eat meat, but you say it's wrong, even though your body wants it, and has been doing so apparently for 1,000,000 years, right? How come this was okay for I don't know how long, maybe it's not millions, I don't know, okay, I don't know anything. But how come it was okay to do this for so long and now it's not okay? Well, it's bad for the planet, you say. All right? And you want to do good for the planet. Is that what you're telling me? You want to do the best thing for the planet? Well, I would say suicide is probably your best contribution to make. Don't have children and kill yourself. Because the amount of CO2 we will save by that is probably greater than any amount you will ever save in any other way. You are pretty much a negative contribution unless you die, then it's zero emission, right? Now, of course, people don't like to hear this. Because they don't want to die. They just want to feel good about themselves. We don't want to have laws about the amount of people on the planet. We want to do whatever the hell we want to do. But we want to feel good about it. So yes, I can fly around the world, but not eat meat. I could drive a car, but not fly around the world. I could eat stuff, but at least I'm separating the garbage, right? I mean, do you understand what I'm trying to hint at here? I'm not trying to, right? I'm not trying to judge anyone. I'm not trying to say vegetarians are right or wrong or whatever. I'm not trying to say flying is good or bad or any of those things. I'm trying to show you that these are all choices, moral choices, which you infuse with rightness and wrongness, even though they're nothing. They're just whatever. And that in fact this choice isn't made for the good of anything except the good for yourself, because that is what is lying beneath you. This ego, this being that is confused because it's both the animal and the God, both the instinct and the awareness. And it's creating friction within itself. And in order to release that friction, it has to find a target to release it on. And so culture has offered you a way to do that. Now it also requires you to be dependent on it. And so that in itself is another friction thing. You are now serving the thing that makes you feel like the master. It's interesting, no? I think it's very interesting. And from my own experience, I can tell you that it's not something you escape in the sense that you can be outside of it. You can see through it, and that is helpful. But you cannot be outside of it. I see my time is running out. As everyone's time naturally is. So, I'm not sure if this was a clean talk or a sloppy talk. But that's just something you have to figure out for yourself. I think if you take away anything from this, to look at and to decide for yourself what it means for you, is to become more aware of what choices am I making and where do they get offered from? And what is the reason for my choosing? What does it mean about me? Why am I choosing this? What is it serving here? And how do I use this choice to look at other people? Right? What is the function of the other here? Because if you live in a culture, then naturally you are a slave to the culture. And if you are a slave to the culture, which makes you feel somewhat like a slave, you need to be the better slave, right? You need to look at other people and say, well, they really don't understand. It is natural. It's not a problem unless you make it a problem. And I'm not trying to make a problem here. I'm just trying to put something in front of you that could be interesting to look at. So, if I've done so, thank you. And I wonder what you think about this. I wonder if you have any questions or any insights that could add to this whole thing. Because I would love to come back to this in another episode. Alright, good luck with that.